So this is a video to showcase the concept of the Primesweeper method. The term Primesweeper is just a play on the idea of Minesweeper. There's this guy named markusdarkess, that's his YouTube name. He mentioned the idea of Minesweeper when it comes to primes. So I like that concept, and he's right on the idea of the concept of Minesweeper, of the idea that primes are essentially the mines, and the non-primes are the areas around the primes, and you want to move the non-primes out the way so that way you know where the primes are. So was a great analogy, and it just makes so much sense. That's why I call it Primesweeper, because the idea is you're trying to sweep away all the non-prime numbers in order to find the prime numbers. So in this part of his video is where he was showcasing the idea of numbers of 3. So you see 3, 13, 23, 33, 43, 53, and so forth and so forth, right? All these numbers ending in 3. A lot of these numbers are prime. A lot of these numbers are not prime. Not every number that ends in 3 is a prime. Not every number that ends in 1 is a prime. Not every number that ends in 7 is a prime. And not every number that ends in 9 is a prime. But a large majority of them are. The thing was is, why aren't all numbers that end in 1 or 3 or 7 or 9 prime? That's the real question. When I was looking into primes for the Riemann hypothesis, but the main thing was just primes in general, just trying to understand them. And it was the idea was like, why are there numbers that you would think would be prime turn out not to be prime, even though they end in 1, 3, 7, or 9? So he was doing this method here where he's counting, where it's like, and you see he has them in sets of 3. So 3, 13, 23. So on the top you see 3 numbers, then 3 numbers under it, and under. So he was, he was counting. So he was like, you count every 3. So you don't count 3, you count the number next to it. So you count 13, 23, and then get to 33. So that's 3 spaces, right? 3 spots. And you end up on 33. Then you count 3 more. You count 43, 53. You count 43, 53, and then you end up on 63. You notice that every time we count to 3, we end up on the side where all the numbers are blue. So we count 73, 83, then we end up on 93. You keep doing that over and over again. The thing is, all the numbers in blue are not prime numbers. Well, most of them are, because if you see over here, 203, that's also not a prime number, but it's over here on this side, which gives you that implies that it's a prime. The thing is, you think it would be a prime because it does end in 3, but it's not a prime. 3 over here is a prime, but it's on the blue side, which implies that it's not a prime. So that right there will look confusing. Right there will look like, oh, there's something wrong here. This pattern doesn't work, because you have a prime on this side, on the non-prime side, and then you have a non-prime on the prime side. That shouldn't be the case if this pattern works out right, works out the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a specific pattern that will always give you the non-primes. But the thing here is that this is incomplete. This is not wrong. This is the first step. It's incomplete. You're actually supposed to do another step and another step and another step. There's more steps, which I will show you, that will move that 203, for example, over to the blue side, the side of the numbers or the non-prime side. So let's go into, so this is what gave me the inspiration, because I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, that 3 and that 203, they're not on the right side, the right colors in this example of his, but the pattern was sound. And so I started looking into the pattern. He also did 7, and it's like, okay, I see there's a pattern there. There's all, you know, but I also saw that there was a incompleteness in that pattern. But it goes back to the idea of what I saw was, yes, it's incomplete because you're only going with just the 3, right? But once you add the 5 and the 7 and the 9 and so forth and so forth, that's when you start getting the real pattern. So this is the pattern. Before I do any other fancy explanation or whatever, I'm gonna just go straight into the pattern. So you see we have 3 right here that I just highlighted. So there's 3. You don't count the 3, you count 3 spaces after the 3. So it's 3 spaces after every number you end up landing on. So first we're going to count, right, 5, 7, 9. That's 3 spaces after the 3, right? So then you get 9. So 9 gets zeroed out. So 9 is not a prime in this situation, you know, for this count. So then we count after 9, which is 1, 3, 9. Right? So we end up here. That's supposed to be 15, and we end up there, not a prime. Right? So we count 1, 2, 3, 21, not a prime. Then 1, 2, 3. Here's on 27, another not a prime. But you notice we jumped over 25. 25 is also not a prime. But why didn't that in the pattern? Why didn't that show up? Why didn't we end up on 25 and then later on 27? Why does that happen? Right? Why is that? Because over here you count 29, 31, then you end on 33, which is not a prime, right? But then right next to it you got 35, which is also not a prime, directly right next to it. Then you jump over and end up over here at 39 not being prime. So then it looks random. It doesn't look like there's a specific pattern, because, you know, there are spots being skipped over. But it's actually easy to understand. What happened is the fact that every number that ends in 5 automatically isn't a prime, right? But the other way to prove that, right, to show that pattern, is by counting every 5 spaces after the number 5. So we'll count 7, 9, right, 11, 13, and right here is supposed to be 15. That is 5 spaces after the 5, which we end up at 0. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We end up at 00, right? We end up right under the 5, and that would be 25. So that's not a prime. That gets zeroed out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is supposed to be 35, and as you can see, it gets zeroed out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You notice I keep ending up right here under the 5, and I keep ending up on all these double zeros that I put. This is just indicating that these numbers will always be zeroed out. They will always be not prime because they end in 5. But you still got to be able to count them. You still got to be able to incorporate them in this pattern of counting, which is why they're still there. But you notice that every time you count 5 spaces, you end up at a number that ends at 5. That ends in 5. All right, ends in 5, and it's not a prime. Then you count 7. So here's 7, right? Count 7 spaces afterwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now you see this is zeroed out right here. And that's 7 spots. Now let's count 7 after that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now you end up here on 35, which we already know, since it ends in 5, it would not be a prime. And as you can see, we landed on it. Counting 7, we landed on it. So double proof that it's not a prime, right? Then we count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 right here. This would have been 49. 49 is not a prime. That's why you see it zeroed out. And you just keep doing this over and over again and keep going. Same goes for 9, right? 9, let's count 9 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you see here, this is supposed to be 27, and as you can see, it's not a prime. And then we count 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We end up here on 45, which is also not a prime. And of course, because it ends in 5, of course it's not a prime. And you just keep on going. You know, and I haven't tried all the numbers, but if I'm right, I've gone up to 19. If I'm right, I've done up to 19. So, you know, I went here 11, right, and count 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. As you can see, that right there is zeroed out. And that's supposed to be 32, and it's not a prime. So you see, if you keep doing this over and over again, every one of these numbers, like 13, right, count 13 spaces after it, you'll land on a non-prime. 17, count 17 spaces after it, you land on a non-prime. You know, I'll show you, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Look, double zero. And that's supposed to be 51. So 51 is not a prime. If you go 17 spaces after the number 17, you'll end up on 51, which is not a prime. And then you count 17 more spaces after that, you'll end up on another number that's not a prime. 19, same thing. Count 19 spaces, and you end up on something that's not a prime. And that's why when you look at the numbers between 0 and 100, you see there's a lot of numbers that end in 1, that end in 3, that end in 7, that end in 9, that aren't prime. And that makes it seem weird, makes it seem like, why aren't they prime even though they end in 1, 3, 7, 9? And this is why. I mean, the pattern speaks for itself. You can keep on going and going. You can see number 23 and then count 23 spaces. You should end up on a double zero. Let's try it out since I haven't gone this far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. There we go. 23 spaces, and I end up on double zero, which is supposed to be 69. So 69 is not a prime. And then I could just keep on going and going and going. You know, the next number will be 29, right? You notice that it's every prime that is a prime. Once you count spaces equal to the same number as that prime afterwards, you'll land on a non-prime. So by reducing all these non-primes, right, by doing this pattern over and over again, you're eliminating all the non-primes. What will leave you will be the primes, which makes sense why later on, like when you get to bigger numbers, there's a lot less primes. There's a lot of bigger gaps between the primes, is because a lot of non-primes are being zeroed out, is what I call it. Zeroed out, right? Getting taken out. Just like, nope, you're not a prime, you're not a prime, you're not a prime. There's a lot of numbers. And they're all largely within the 1, 3, 7, 9 category. So this is the Primesweeper method, which, you know, I was trying to get to. It's like I saw that these numbers right here, the 3, the 5, the 7, the 9. There's also a 2, of course. It's supposed to be 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 5 numbers, but we're only working with 5 numbers if you add the 5 as the middle ground. But the 1, 3, 7, 9 are the main numbers. 5 is just what separates the 1, 3 and the 7, 9. So that way, when you're doing this count, you see it all adds up. It all makes sense. It patterns right. So I've been looking for this pattern for a while, and I was like, but I was only focusing on the ones at first, trying to see if there was a pattern there that I can also copy over to pattern to the 3s, to the 7s, to the 9s. But once I saw markusdarkess, I just call him Marcus's stuff, you know, his video where he was talking about like counting every 3 space after 3 and after every number you land on, you know, you start seeing that you're landing on non-primes. Instead of finding a pattern of landing on primes and finding primes, it was about not finding primes, finding the non-primes, and then by default, since you're zeroing out all the non-primes, whatever you'll see left will be the primes, which is the Minesweeper idea, right? The idea of going around the mine, you know, digging around the mine, clearing everything around the mine instead of, you know, touching the mine, as it were. So getting rid of all the non-primes will eventually reveal all the primes, obviously, right? So it's like, that's a good method, that's a good way of doing it, and as you can see, it works so far. So this obviously will take a long time to do it. I don't know how far you have to go with the 3 count, but I'm assuming you have to, from 3, you have to do the 3 count to infinity, right? To zero out all the non-primes that are 3 spaces after a prime, you know, or after a certain set amount of counting, right? Counting of 3, and then 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, 31, 37, 41, 43, 47, 53, 59, and so on and so on. Because obviously once you get down here to this bottom section, there's 239, which means I think that is a prime, right? I think I did complete this little set here. So 239 is a prime. You have to count 239 spaces, right, numbers after this to land on a non-prime, which most likely means the next number after it would be a prime or not. Because as you see over here, once you land on this thing, which is not a prime, right next to it there's also another non-prime. Just like if you land on here, clearly not a prime, but right next to it there's also another non-prime, which makes the pattern originally confusing and makes it where it's like, oh, there's no pattern, it's random. It's like, no, there is a pattern. The pattern was always here at the top. The pattern was always within the first 10 numbers of what you were supposed to do. And what you're supposed to do is, like Marcus demonstrated, was count 3 spaces after the 3 and do that all the way down to infinity, essentially, and then move over to well, there's no need to go to 5 because you will always end up in the middle section. You will always end up on a number that ends in 5, so that will always not be prime. So that's why by default 5 is obviously not prime. Same goes for 2. So then you go to the next one, which is 7. Count 7 spaces after that, you'll end up on a non-prime. Count 9 after that, you'll end up on a prime. Count 11 after that, you end up on a non-prime. Remember, I mean non-prime. Count 13 after 13 spaces, you get on a non-prime, and so forth and so forth. And that's the important detail of that pattern, that method, the Primesweeper method. And I definitely want to give Marcus, you know, his credit for showing that little pattern. And all I'm doing is just expanding on it, where it's like, yeah, I'm just putting emphasis on it of like, yeah, count 3 spaces, then count 5, right? Then count 7, then count 9. You can skip 5, but because 5, again, like I said, anything that ends in 5 automatically is 0. So you just have to you don't have to count it. You could just punch it in, and as obviously it ends in 5s, it's automatically not a prime. But everything that ends in 1s, 3s, 7s, and 19, you should be doing the numbers. You know, the counting. This will also help take out obviously the non-primes, so that means you don't ever have to count the non-primes and count. Like for example, over here, this would be 49 in this spot that I just highlighted. You're not going to count 49 spaces after that. it won't be necessary. You'll just go to the next number that isn't zeroed out, which will be 53, because 53 is the prime. You just go to the next prime and then start counting from there, all the way down, and, to infinity, or into whichever high number you're trying to get to. So the next thing will be to create a program. That's something I wanted to do once I got a pattern that I would like to be able, obviously use and turn into a program. So you can see up here, I put it every third number starting the count after 3 is not a prime, and then 5th, 7th, 9th, and so forth and so forth. It just kept on going. At first, I thought it might just only be 3, 5, 7, 9, or just 3, 7, 9. But it turned out that it was actually way more than that, because you can count 11 and get that result, count 13 spots and get that result, 17 spots. And it's like, okay, so every prime, every count spaces after that prime number is equal to the prime number, and then just keep doing that pattern over and over again. Just keep, every time you find a non-prime, just count the 23 spaces and keep on going type thing. Then you will keep finding more. You'll keep finding more non-primes that way. So the primes do lead to finding non-primes, and by finding the non-primes, you're eliminating the non-primes, which means you'll end up with just having the primes left over. So the primes we already have can help us find the primes we don't have by zeroing out all the non-primes that are out there. So don't want to go any further, don't want to make this video too long. Just want to show this idea of the Primesweeper method that y'all can play around with. I'll probably make a program. I'll try to do it, but it would be cool if somebody else did it who's better at programming, to actually be able to create a program that can automatically do this counting method. And let's see how far we can go into the billions and the trillions, find all the primes through this method, which is a long, tedious method, but it is a method. And that's the end of the video.